Last week, we looked at the first 8 sections of the Virginia Declaration of Rights. This predecessor to the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights not only gives us some ideas about what Thomas Jefferson was thinking when he wrote the Declaration, but why George Mason eventually refused to sign the Constitution when the other framers did. Now, let's finish the job by going through the last 8 sections. So we'll do that next on the Constitution Study. Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. Yes, today we're looking at the Virginia Declaration because of the impact it had both on the Declaration of Independence and on the eventual Bill of Rights. Now, you can find out more about the Constitution Study, get some more information, join my radio program, or support the work that we're doing. But I'll talk more about that at the end of the episode. But for now, let's finish off with the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Let's pick up with Section 9, that excessive bail ought not to be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. We repeated this language word for word in the 8th Amendment to the Constitution for the United States. It was meant to help prevent something so common in life today, the process being the punishment. Imagine being held in jail, awaiting trial, and unable to participate in your own defense because your bail is excessive. Sound like something those charged with the crimes related to the January 6th demonstration? Or what about being fined $100,000 for not paying a $100 fine? That happened a few years ago in Connecticut when a man's house was confiscated for failure to pay a small tax. Section 10. That general warrants whereby an officer or messenger may be commanded to search suspected places without evidence of a fact committed, or to seize any person or persons not named, or whose offense is not particularly described and supported by evidence, are grievous and oppressive and ought not to be granted. This should remind you of the 4th Amendment and its protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, look at law enforcement today. Judges have said they can search not because it's reasonable, but because you didn't try to keep it secret. Even worse, consider recent news stories about the Department of Justice using tools to search your social media, or law enforcement using general surveillance without any evidence of your criminal intent. Section 11. That in controversies respecting property and in suits between man and man, the ancient trial by jury is preferable to any other and ought to be held sacred. When was the last time you saw a jury summons and thought about anything except getting out of it? Why was this idea of lawsuits being tried by jury included in the 7th Amendment, which reads, in suits of common law, where the value in controversies shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. Why is trial by jury so important? Because it places the fate of the accused in the hands of we, the people, rather than government. In the case of civil trials, whether or not the person seeking redress wins is not decided by the judge or another employee of government, but by a group of ordinary citizens. This is especially important when a government is one of the parties in the suit. Section 12. That the freedom of the press is one of the great bulwarks of liberty and can never be restrained but by despotic governments. One of the most common misconceptions regarding freedom of the press in the First Amendment is to whom it applies. Many people think that this freedom applies to the news media, possibly because of the press badges they wear. But according to Noah Webster, the press is the art or business of printing and publishing. That means anyone involved in the art or business of printing or publishing is a member of the press. The freedoms mentioned in Section 12 of the Virginia Declaration of Rights and the First Amendment are not about a profession, but your ability to print or publish your thoughts. If, as the Virginia Declaration states, freedom of the press can only be restrained by despotic governments, what does that say about the current push by so many states and federal agencies to restrain your ability to publish, especially on social media? Section 13. That a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. That standing armies in times of peace should be avoided as dangerous to liberty, and that in all cases the military should be under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. If you want to understand the Second Amendment to the Constitution, this would be a great place to start. Many talk about the militia, but here we see that it's composed of the people who are trained in arms. These militias are, as the Second Amendment states, necessary to a free state, that standing armies in a time of peace are dangerous to our liberties, and that the military should be subordinate to the civilian power. These all point to the need of the people to not only have control over the military, but the arms to enforce it. Section 14. That the people have a right to uniform government, and therefore, that no government separated from or independent of the government of Virginia ought to be erected or established within the limits thereof. It seems a week does not go by when someone claims that there's another constitution or another government in charge of this country. Not surprisingly, when asked for evidence, no one has yet come up with any. But what about those who ignore the law, or government that acts outside of it, but get away with it? We have a uniform central government, governed by the Constitution. At least that's what the law says. If we wish to protect our rights, then we need to ensure that the uniform government established under the Constitution is kept in place. Section 15. That no free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people but by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue, and by frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. This is one lesson every American should learn. If you wish to enjoy freedom and liberty, we must adhere to a few simple principles: justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue. We do this by frequently reminding ourselves of the importance of these fundamental principles. Today, however, we do not adhere to justice, but place adjectives in front of it. We eschew moderation, temperance, and frugality, and we've replaced virtue with vice. No wonder our government is no longer free, but indebted to the political parties. And finally, Section 16. That religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience, and that it is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity toward each other. Religion can be a touchy subject with some. Whether you believe in the God of the Bible, Allah, Buddha, or the random chance of the universe, do we not owe our Creator a duty? How we fulfill that duty is up to us. The use of force, violence, or coercion should never be considered to attempt to persuade others what their duty is. Therefore, we are entitled to exercise our religion freely, according to the dictates of our own conscience. Mr. Mason also said that the Christian duties of forbearance, love, and charity is something we owe to each other. I don't know about you, but I have found this look into our past both informative and a bit uplifting. If the people of Virginia could recognize these rights before we declared independence, then what should prevent us now? If 18th century Virginians could extend these rights to their neighbors, why not 21st century Americans? Seeing so much of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights in this declaration gives me a better understanding of the men who pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor to independence. Now, our walk through this Virginia Declaration of Rights also showed me the why of George Mason's refusal to sign the Constitution. How many sections of this document were missing in the Constitution that was drafted in 1787? How many rights not protected? How many restrictions on government not said? If, as Mr. Mason wrote in section 15, that no free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people, but by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue, and by frequent recurrence to fundamental principles, then this recurrence to the fundamental principles of liberty should become a regular and frequent occurrence. I know it will be for me. You know, in school, I had no real interest in history. Never really excited me, never got my attention. Probably because most people who talked about it talked about names and places and dates, and there was nothing to it. But as I read these words of George Mason, I see people. I see reality. I see dreams and wishes that they would like to have happen. The desire to live free, the desire to enjoy the blessings of liberty. They don't come free, do they? They come with responsibilities. That includes the responsibilities of choosing our elected representatives in government and in holding them accountable. But mostly by extending the rights that we want to those we disagree with. To me, that is the true test of liberty. Will you extend the right that you cherish to the person you disagree with, to the person you despise? Then will we be the land of the free. Until then, we just seem to be playing around the edges. Now, I hope you enjoyed this. Head over to constitutionstudy.com. You can find the text version of this article. You can find a lot of other articles. The first half that I did last week. You can ask a question. Just click the button. I love answering questions. You can find our Scholars program. You can find the radio program. Everything is right there. And if you can support the work we're doing here at the Constitution Study, I would appreciate that greatly. But the greatest thing you do, the most important thing you could do, is take this information and share it. What is it they say? Knowledge is power? I disagree. Knowledge in action is power. To know something and not do anything with it, that's not power. That's potential energy, but it's not power. So start by simply sharing this article, this video, this podcast, along with the first half I did last week. Let other people know about the Virginia Declaration of Rights and, by extension, the Constitution Study. The more people know about this, the more we learn, the better chance we have of returning to those fundamental principles of freedom and liberty that George Mason talked about and that so many of us claim to want. But we can't do it alone, and we can't do it all by ourselves here at the Constitution Study. We need your help, whether that's financial, whether that's by sharing, or whether that's just by inviting me to come speak at your event or in your town. Do something. Help us return to those fundamental principles. And if you found that worthwhile, if you found that enjoyable, well, join me next time, hopefully with some friends, right here at the Constitution Study.